it's great to be here, Tim and Dan. So again, my name is Jakob, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Butter, which is like Zoom but laser focused on trainings and workshops. I am I'm based in Copenhagen, Denmark, but actually traveling quite a bit as we are a fully remote team.
Nice, yeah. So you guys are, every single member of your team is remote. Do you ever meet up? Is it kind of like 100% remote all the time?
It's so actually I have a co-working space with one of my co-founders, Christopher, who's also here in Denmark. So we do work together now and again. I think I'm in that office 2 to 3 days a week.
Okay.
But aside from that, we meet up as a team once a year, and we've got our next team meetup coming up in 14 days.
Nice.
So that's gonna be awesome.
Where is it?
Bali, of all places.
Oh.
Yes, I know, rough life.
Can Dan and I come to record it?
Yeah. Look, if you're just embarking on a boot camp story right now, and you've been sold that dream that you get to work remote, go to Bali, definitely.
Exactly. That's the main conclusion from this. When you work remotely, you can go to Bali.
Right.
So
it's true.
It's true. So that dovetails nicely into sort of what we want to talk about today. And we kind of wanted to get you on the show, Jakob, because you're kind of an expert in this remote working space. You know, Butter is a remote work first company, and it builds a tool to help remote work better. But obviously for juniors, that can be a bit of a daunting task. So we just wanted to do a bit of a deep dive into the importance of, you know, remote work and how you can make it work. So maybe you could just give us a bit of a context of how remote work has changed the landscape of the tech industry, and especially with sort of the rise of remote first companies.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Tim. I think like remote work before COVID think it was mostly reserved to a few very specific companies that were well known for this. Some of them are like GitLab or Automatic behind WordPress or Doist to do software. There were a lot of these large companies that were very well known to be focused on remote work. And something they were also very well known for was their focus on asynchronous work. So again, not having too many meetings or very few meetings actually, and having a lot of asynchronous connection. Now, during COVID or when COVID hit, a lot of companies were created and a lot of large companies went fully remote. Some of them stayed remote after the pandemic. Some of the companies that were created, like Butter, stayed remote. Most of those that were created remote stayed remote because of the way that people were recruited. And some of the companies that went fully remote during COVID, they stayed remote after the pandemic afterwards, also seeing that this is actually a very good way to work. I think one of the big things that changed there was a change from this very asynchronous way of working, and by asynchronous I mean, you know, sending over looms, primarily working via documents, actually not having any real meetings. So and people in all time zones, because you didn't actually have to be in a particular time zone, to companies like this big swath of companies being created that with quite a few synchronous sessions or meetings, as they are more commonly known, right? And people, because you want to talk with other people, and you want to talk with people when you're not like talking to a loom, right? So that I think was a big change that happened when remote went more mainstream during COVID. And that's kind of, just to kind of wrap this up, that's kind of one of the big things that we're building for with Butter, is this whole idea of allowing synchronous collaboration to be much better.
Yeah.
Nice.
Do you think it's going to remain that way moving forward? Do you think there's going to be a shift back into office stuff? There's been a few changes. How do you think it's going to look?
There's been changes, right? I think there's pros and cons. I think, again, the biggest pro as a company to operating remotely is access to talent from all over the world. It's like the number one thing. You'll hear a lot of other things, but this is like the number one thing. You can recruit much better people much faster because you can recruit from anywhere in the world. And the companies that have chosen to operate this way, like we have, they have just seen this benefit is just so big that they'll stay that way. I think for other companies that have a very high talent density or have a lot of talent in the near vicinity where it's not as important to tap into this talent, such as companies operating in, say, Silicon Valley, or we see also Amazon go back to fully in office lately. They have so much talent in the near vicinity that they don't need this huge swath of talent from around the world. And they'll therefore probably go back in office. But I see a lot of startups continue to be created remotely, and I will see a lot of companies that went remote and saw this big talent increase just stay remote.
So do you think that the talent, it's the talent acquisition that's the main driver for you? It's not the like focus work at home, all that kind of stuff?
No. All of these things are good, and they're good. Or what do you call it? Side effects, if you will. But they're also to some extent debatable. You've got like the whole pros. Yeah, you got focus work at home, and that's really good. You're able to work, like you have less commute time, so people can spend their time working. Also a big pro. But then you have the whole, serendipity is lost, or collaboration in office is lost, or culture is lost. So it's like these pros and cons, and they can be debated. But one thing that cannot be debated is, you've got access to more talent. And to some extent, you've also got access to, for, say, companies in the US, you've got access to more affordable talent across Europe or Asia. So though talent access is the number one reason for companies to want to keep staying remote, or at the very least hybrid.
I've never really heard that argument before. It's kind of very emphatic. I like it. It's like it's better.
I mean, then for individuals, of course, there's a lot of different pros and cons. Like for me as an individual, like I work a ton of hours as a founder, but because I do remote work and work from home, I can still be together with my family quite a bit and flex around like my times of being with a family. So being able to be like work a ton and still be a family dad, that's an important thing to me. But that's again an individual thing that you're tapping into. But for a company, like it's talent access. It's the number one reason.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, just to bring it back to Butter then as a platform, how has it transformed? How's the platform transformed and positioned itself? As you're saying, sort of in this world of remote and asynchronous to then sort of synchronous. How has the platform kind of transformed to help people effectively run workshops in this new space?
Yeah. So, again, one of our big beliefs in remote work was and still is that one of the challenges that you'll face is synchronous collaboration. So that means like a lot of the reasons why people say, we need to go back to the office because then we can stand at a whiteboard together, or we can chat and we can collaborate. It's so much easier than when you do it online over Zoom or Teams or Meet. And we wanted to build a platform that made synchronous collaboration, much, much easier and better. And our idea there was to start with the most complex of collaborative sessions, which is workshops, trainings, brainstorms, these things that take up a lot of space, require a lot of planning. And that's kind of what we built Butter for initially. Mm-hmm. But over time, we have transformed, and we've gone to down complexity or down market or whatever you want to say it, into less complex sessions like ad hoc brainstorms or other types of less structured synchronous collaboration. That's kind of where we've headed as well.
Built it in a week, didn't you? For the first start?
The first concept, I think it was 2 weeks, Dan. But 1 week sounds better. Like 5 years down the line, we would have built it in 2 days, right? So that's all right.
No, I think. Look, if I'm talking to boot campers out there, maybe someone who's new into tech, that is such a mind-blowing fact that you've got something out the door in 2 weeks. Obviously, there's caveats to it. You had a version of it, a working version, an MVP out. But the fact you can just put a stack together, what was that, 4 years ago? 3-4 years now?
Yeah, 4 years ago. 4 years ago. Yeah.
So I imagine it's even faster now if you did it.
Yeah, it's even faster. Yeah.
Now you've done it a few times, you could do it really quick.
Do it again. Yeah. Okay, well, speaking to those people then, who are maybe kind of new in their career and moving into remote first, what kind of skills do you think people need to bring into this remote first environment?
There's one big thing that we always screen for, and especially in juniors, but actually in all types of employees, and that's proactivity. Like the big thing that the reason why you hear a lot of bosses say, I need people back in office because then I can monitor them and make sure they do stuff, right? The big reason there is that you do need to have a very high level of trust in employees when they're working remotely, and you can't actually monitor what they're doing. You can't monitor their inputs. You can only monitor their outputs, which, by the way, is the way you should do things, right? But as an individual and as a new person joining the workforce there, it's just so important that you have that you're not reactive, that you don't sit and wait for work to come to you when you're working in a remote environment, because it'll just be less. It's tougher for people to see, to have full transparency into whether you're working or not and what you're working on, etc. And you need to take that responsibility of making sure that people and your boss, most specifically, or but also the rest of the team, know what you're working on. And if you're not working on something, then proactively seek out, hey, what should I be working on next, right? Because if you're reactive, you'll not survive for long in a remote company. You might be able to hide, but you will never be able to thrive, and you'll probably be fired because you're not doing a good enough job, or you might not learn anything or whatever. So proactivity is the number one most important thing.
Yeah, I think that really kind of dovetails into experience I've had recently, where I joined a company that's it's not 100% remote, but it's very much remote first. And I think the proactivity part is so sort of front and center of everybody's minds. But when everybody's distributed, and you have to get things done, and just like asking questions that that you like asynchronously, that not going to be answered the night before, till the night after. But what advice would you give boot camp grads who actually need to do this, especially, I guess, in the first few weeks of onboarding? Because that's the experience that I had, where like I can be proactive. I've got a bit of experience, and kind of the job was not sort of fresh, but I chose to do my onboarding in person. Like I spent 2 weeks sat with somebody to actually get to grips with the tech stack that I was using.
It feels like a senior trait to be able to just proactively see what I should do next, and therefore go to it. And then to have a whole company's worth of people doing that,
I hear you, Dan. Like, it seems like a senior trait, but I'd actually argue it isn't really, because it's down to two different things, right? It's down to giving transparency into what you're doing now. So you need to all be proactive in what you're doing now, and everyone can do that. That's not a senior trait, right? I mean, that's just hey, today I am writing up a blog post or whatever, right? That's not for developers, but then what feature that you're working on, right? This is what you're doing now, and be proactive just in communicating what you're doing. And when and then the second piece is be proactive in communicating when you believe that you're done with stuff, or as soon as you're done with stuff, be proactive in asking for more stuff to do, right? And maybe and for absolute juniors, you might not yourself know what to do next or know exactly where to go, but you very well know when you're done with something and you can ask for something new to do. Yeah. It's honestly down to those two different things. So be sure you give transparency into what you're doing, and be proactive in terms of asking for new stuff once you're done with what you're doing.
Yeah,
and to that onboarding point, though, like how do you... Oh, sorry, Dan, go on.
I was just saying it's very unlikely you'll be in an environment where there is no ticket board of
exactly.
just do this one task and then figure it out when you finish.
Done.
Yeah.
How do you handle onboarding at Butter, though? How do you guys actually do that? Someone joins.
Super unstructured. Okay. I mean, it's like we got some Notion docs, and then we're like, here's our stack, right? So it's like an overview of the different things we've got. Here are the things where you can find some things, but otherwise talk to your manager, right? Okay. I mean, it's super unstructured, and you'll see that in a lot of. I think it's medium unstructured. There's a Notion, and there's like tick mark and stuff, right? But it's medium unstructured. And you'll see that in a lot of startups. Like, it is just unstructured. But what we do ensure is that there's enough manager employee time in the first couple of weeks. And again, back to the whole, like you mentioned, Tim, like sitting next to someone in the first couple of weeks. Like, we use Slack huddles a ton, and especially for new employees, right? So just huddling with your manager and talking through things. We do pair programming quite a bit. So it's like all these different things that will help you will help in imitating the whole sit next to the person that you need to work with in the first period of time there.
Got it. Nice.
Yeah. Good little tip, though, for newcomers out there: transcript all meeting conversations. because it's amazing what you can do with a transcript now. Put it through GPT,
100%.
summarize this for me. Not only do you just get a summary of bullet points, I put like the voice chat on. So when I'm like cooking dinner, I'm like, okay, respond to me in a more conversational tone and give me the major points of this thing I've just been onboarded to.
Nice, I love that.
Then I'll ask it, if you were me, what would you do next? What haven't I asked, and what holes are in my current knowledge? And it will say, oh, you should have a meeting with the CTO and ask about how they plan to solve this problem that was mentioned in that meeting. And it's like, I never would have thought of that.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
So talking about the communication with remote stuff, how important are things like Butter or Slack or Zoom for remote industries now?
Yeah, like, I mean, again, Slack is. I'll focus on Slack first because I think that's like the modern HQ for a lot of remote startups. That there are other tools as well, but I think that the vast majority will be using Slack. And we've done a lot of experiments in different types of Slack. Again, we're a company of some 13 people, so we're not super big. But we've tried having a lot of different Slack channels, and we've tried with reasonably few Slack channels, and we've actually defaulted to few Slack channels that most people see, instead of having like a lot of domain-specific Slack channels.
Right.
So it's helped a lot in general visibility from the team on everything, because otherwise, like, we'd have a dev Slack channel, we'd have a marketing Slack channel, etc., and people wouldn't, from different teams, they would only see their own thing, so it'd be very siloed, which is pretty shitty when you're a small company like ours.
Yeah.
So we default to one, and I think that just following conversations in Slack are incredibly helpful. And back to the whole, like, what can you do as a new grad? Well, one thing is just keeping up to date. Like, one thing that I think grads have, or say especially younger people have, more than people with more responsibilities, I guess you can say, is time. Right.
Okay.
So again, I remember myself in the 20s. I had all the time in the world. Right. I could work 90-hour weeks, no flinching. Right. Can't do that anymore for a lot of reasons. Makes up responsibility and just pure stamina. Right. But you got that time. Right. So use it to keep updated on the company Slack. Like, read all those channels. Like, just suck in that information, because I think it's just like you'll find so much good stuff there that'll just help you be better. And I'm sure that there's different AI tools that you can also use to consolidate some of that stuff in. But like, regardless, just inform yourself, I think.
90-hour weeks aren't the Danish way. I thought you guys had the best work-life balance in the world.
I'm not
up in the foot there. You won the geographical lottery and then chose to work.
Yeah, I know. I'm a maniac, Dan. I'm terribly sorry about that, but no.
My whole plan is to figure out how to get to the Nordics so I can, it's the law. I can only work for.
So I can only work 90 hours.
No, that's France. That's France and Germany, dude.
It's not Germany.
Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I thought they also had some kind of law against working many hours. In Denmark, there are no laws, but it's just generally not okay to work too much.
Well, I guess it's, on the flip side, it's interesting, isn't it? In Australia, they passed a law recently that said you can't message if you get an email after 6 p.m. You legally don't have to reply to it. So that's it. I don't know how that works with asynchronous work and like international companies.
All of these, I think they're so stupid, those rules, right? I mean, they actually take away freedom from. They think they give freedom to the employees, and maybe they do so in extremely bureaucratic jobs. But I think they also I think they end up taking away more freedom from the employees, because suddenly, if that's the case, then you have to work until 6 p.m. You cannot, like, again, I mean, I would go to the gym from 3 to 4, or I'll go like pick up my kid or whatever, right? Suddenly, no, that's not possible, because like by law, you have to do this work within these hours. So you're taking away freedom from people instead of giving them and protecting them. Mollycoddling.
I'm glad that we have been in our careers, in our adult lives, the paradigm has shifted from in a single location, 9 to 5, or whatever the Dolly Parton song is, to a much more, agile workspace.
It wouldn't work in the same way, would it? Working flexible hours. What a way to make a living.
In an agile dev team, yeah.
Would not be a beautiful song.
All right, okay. So back to the topic of things that graduates might find useful. If I was a graduate and I'm looking for a company to work at, and I see this company that's on site, they have amazing. They get together all the time and they're fostering collaboration because they're in the office all the time. They're having like after work drinks, they're getting pizzas and stuff. How does that cross over into the world of remote work? How can you foster strong collaboration and teamwork when everybody's remote and glue people together?
Oh yeah, it's not like I think there's one big myth that just needs to be kind of removed or what's called dispelled. Busted, I guess is the correct word, right? And that's this whole idea that you can only create bonds if you eat pizza and drink beer together. It's like the only way that you can somehow connect with people. And I think that you actually connect to people a whole ton when you're solving problems together and when you're working together with people on incredibly interesting stuff, right? And that's not to be said that there's not a big value to these social elements, and I do think that there's a big value to these social elements. But sometimes, but I think that the most important bonding actually happens over work, because that's kind of why you are gathered there, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is a lot of remote companies, just like ours, they do meetups, right? At least one annual meetup is normal for remote companies with everyone in the team, and then also which we also do in Butter, like regional meetups that are way more frequent. So don't think that working remotely means working remotely all the time.
Yeah,
I do think one caveat to this is if you're let me say it differently. If I was a fresh grad and I lived in a location where I had the opportunity to join the exact same company versus a fully remote company that does the exact same thing, I might actually swerve towards joining the in-person company if I had all the time in the world and I really valued these, like, again, going out for drinks and pizza with my colleagues. But the problem is the opportunities are just and that's the flip side of the hiring thing. Like, maybe that company is not in your hometown or in the city that you're currently in. And that's when remote work just becomes super interesting for you as a grad, because you can actually join companies that you wouldn't otherwise be able to join simply by expanding the market, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, in the interest of being on the flip side, what kind of problems are caused by remote work, and how do these platforms like Butter help solve these kind of issues?
Well, there's all the typical ones, right? There's burnout due to overwork. That's actually what a lot of people see, because it's very hard to kind of create these boundaries between personal life and work life when you're working remotely, especially when you're working from home and don't have any co-working space or office or whatever location to go away to, right? And you need to be very strict with yourself on creating those boundaries. Again, you connected to that, loneliness can also be a big issue, especially for these companies that are incredibly async. I don't think that people are async beings, to be perfectly honest. I think people actually like talking to each other. Even when you're a bit introvert, you still enjoy that. So if there are not enough synchronous sessions, not enough meetings, not enough chats, that could also you can end up very lonely. Collaboration problems if you don't speak enough to your colleagues, or if you don't have proper processes set up for collaboration, that could be difficult. There's so many of these things that are just overall tougher with remote work, and the one solution to that is just be more mindful. You need to be more mindful, both as an individual and as a company, towards these things, and set up processes or that kind of tackles this. I'm not sure, again, platforms like Butter seeks to solve the collaboration problem there, the synchronous collaboration problem, and focus a lot on how can we make it easier to collaborate together in a synchronous manner, because that's one of the big issues of it's just super tough to kind of express or conceptualize things when you're not there in person, and that's one of the things we want to solve, for instance. But it's just one of the problems.
I've forgotten the name now. Though, what you could make an 8-bit, it's top-down isometric.
Gather Town, or
Gather Town, and you had a virtual office. You could walk around. You still sat in a private space, but you were always. That was kind of fun.
That was good. I like that platform. Yeah, that's cool.
I think a lot of good platforms came out during COVID.
Yeah.
A lot of them have died, sadly, again. But yeah.
I couldn't tell you why that didn't stick, but I just never missed it after.
I think it did for the companies that really adopt. I know my friend runs a cooperative creative agency, and they swear by it. They couldn't exist without it.
Yeah, for those who don't know what we're talking about, have a quick Google. It's just like, it looks like a video game, but all your colleagues log in, and if you walk up to someone, it initiates a video chat. So it's one step away from actually talking to people. It's pretty good.
So maybe with that in mind, it's just sort of to wrap things up. I mean, it's a bit of an open-ended question to wrap things up, but how do you kind of see the future of remote collaboration? Have you got like one eye on like a pair of Meta glasses that's going to transform your surroundings into a VR environment, or is it a bit more down to earth than that?
I think we have a tendency to overestimate like these different tech advances in the short term and underestimate them in the long term, right? Actually, I feel like a lot of companies, they are still to this very day, and we're seeing it, are still to this very day come to grips with video conferencing. It's like COVID definitely accelerated it, but there's still a lot of like people that struggle with, turning on their mics and their cameras when they enter a video conferencing call, right? I mean, you'd be surprised, right?
We make them mistakes on the podcast regularly.
There you go, right?
Yeah, very regularly.
So I think like in the short term, like I think we're kind of there, or like a lot of the things that we've seen now are people kind of just need to come to grips with all the big leap in collaboration that happened during COVID. I think in the longer term, things will change. I mean, one of the big types of technologies that came out during COVID was canvas boards or canvas tools like Miro, Mural, Lucid. They became mainstream from being very niche. And I think that's one of the things that we're seeing developing now. And I think, and that's a totally new paradigm for collaborating. I mean, we also believe that there's different paradigms for collaborating that will pop up during the next 5 to 10 years. And I don't know what those paradigms will look like, but I can tell you they're not going to look like the stuff that we know today. I don't think they'll look like AR or VR or whatever like that either. I think that we'll find new paradigms that just work better or more seamlessly for us. But I can't tell you exactly what they're going to be because they are exactly that. Paradigm shifts. Yeah, exactly.
I think the teenager in me always wanted VR to kind of work, but it's just not.
It comes up.
Yeah, it's never good.
I think there's been like 3 or 4 VR gaming revolutions, and I've always been disappointed with every single one. So
that's a shame.
All right, I think that's it. I think if you could, if you've got a link to Butter, if you give us what's the best place to get in touch with you and find Butter for the listeners out there who are intrigued.
Yeah, check out Butter at butter.us or butter.us. We've got a free version and a free trial, so you can just click around and check it out and see whether it enhances your collaboration. And for myself, you can check me out on LinkedIn. That's probably where I'm the most active, at Jakob Knutzen. That's Jakob with a K and Knutzen with a TZ. And I write a lot about remote work, facilitation, and building awesome products. So yeah.
Cool. Perfect.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.